Beneath the noise, beyond our differences, there are roots that intertwine us. We are the human community. Hi everyone, I'm Toria with the Human Community. Thank you so much for being here. Today's guest is someone who has beautifully bridged modern science and ancient practices. Dr. Sarah Cavrak is a cognitive scientist who has spent over 25 years studying the human cognition, behavior, and spirituality. She's earned her PhD in cognitive sciences and went on to build a full-service research department studying how we think, decide, and respond in areas like health, belief systems, and human behavior. Her work has been published in respected journals including Memory and Cognition, Applied Cognitive Psychology, and the International Journal for the Psychology of Religion. And she's contributed to platforms such as Elephant Journal and Yoga Trade. What I love so much about Sarah's journey is that not only is she a cognitive scientist, but also a yoga instructor, holistic wellness coach, and a Reiki Master. What makes her work so impactful is how she brings that research onto the yoga mat and into the body, where real healing and transformation begins. In this episode, we'll explore her journey and the science behind how yoga and Reiki supports the nervous system. In a time when so many of us are navigating chronic stress and fatigue, this conversation couldn't happen at a better time. And now sit back and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Human Community. Welcome, Sarah, to the Human Community. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes. So I first met you in one of your wonderful workshops called Yoga and the Nervous System. And I truly enjoyed it, and I'm so grateful. Do you offer that online, by the way?
It is my intention to offer it online. Up to this point, I've only done in-person workshops 2 hours, and then that 2 hours has sort of become 2.5, and it really should be more like a 3-hour workshop. But I actually intend on recording a series of smaller lectures and then just having them perpetually online that people can sort of move through as sort of a self-paced e-course. And I'm really hoping to do that before the end of this month.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and dive in. I was in the introduction, I was telling everybody about your background. I'm so curious to know what came first for you, the passion for yoga or for cognitive science?
Yeah, so it's such a good question because when you look at all the things I've done and all the degrees that I have and in my experiences, and you go like, how does all this work together? Like, how did all of this formulate within a single person? And I think about that myself, like, how did I even get to this point? But actually, it all really started with psychology. I found psychology, like the field of psychology, and got exposed to it actually in high school. I took a single semester course, very, very broad overview of the field of psychology. And that sparked something in me that nothing else had ever really sparked. Like, I just felt something that really just felt like connection and interest, and it lit a fire in me. And it was very clear from that single semester course that that's what I wanted to study in college. And so when I applied to go to undergraduate, I already knew that I wanted to be a psych major. And I know a lot of people sort of aren't sure and they switch majors a few times, but that was not me. When the first moment that I started understanding the human mind and human behavior, I knew that that's the thing that I wanted to know more about. So all of this whole journey that I've been on started when I began college in the year 2000. So it's been 26 years that I've been studying psychology. I continue to be a psychologist. And I had a friend and roommate in college my junior year who was so sweet and noticed as a friend and roommate that I had a natural high anxiety baseline, which was very true. I was highly anxious. I was pretty high strung to the point of even being, I would say, unbearable. It felt unbearable inside, and I couldn't help it coming out into my world. And she said, you know, Sarah, you're kind of high anxiety and you might really enjoy yoga. It's good for the body. You'll get a good workout, but you'll also feel really calm in the mind. And maybe, you know, if you want to come with me, I would be happy to go with you for your first class. So I was obliging. I thanked her for the suggestion. I said, that sounds great. And so she took me to my first class, and I have not stopped practicing yoga ever since. And I distinctly remember, and at that point I was pretty healthy. I grew up sort of a slightly overweight kiddo and lost a lot of that weight sort of early to mid high school. So by the time I got to college, I was pretty fit, pretty healthy. And even with that first class was so hard. And I remember being in down dog and just like shaking, going, why is this so hard? I thought I was so strong and so healthy. And the only posture I felt like I really accomplished was child's pose, which for those that are listening, if you aren't exposed to yoga and don't know what child's pose is, it's basically with your sitting on the ground, like knees on the ground, hips on heels, and your upper body folded down. So it's a pretty restorative posture. But I remember walking away feeling like down dog was so hard. Two, the only pose I really accomplished was child's pose. And the final thing I noticed is that I came out of Shavasana, the final shape, the final resting posture, and I was simultaneously so relaxed and so energized at the exact same time. And that's not anything I had ever felt before. As a highly anxious person, or at least I was, I'm not really anymore, but as a kiddo and as an adolescent and an early adult, I had so much baseline anxiety. It's the only way that's just how I lived in the world, was sort of always on edge, always ready to almost lash out because I struggled to navigate the world in a way that was easeful. And so this idea of being energized without being on edge and being relaxed without being tired, like that just sort of didn't live in my world. And so for me, that was a really profound paradox that I experienced. And it was that feeling of being both energized and relaxed at the same time that like sort of turned on a light bulb inside me. And I went, I've got to do that again. Like, this is something special. This is something different. This is not when I go to the gym and I work out and I feel really strong, but I'm tired. You know, this is something really unique, and I'm going to come back again. And 23 years later, I've never stopped.
And let's talk about that for a minute as far as what does yoga do? What happens in the body when we are practicing yoga? For those who have never practiced it, when you say that it's energizing and relaxing at the same time, I'm curious from a scientific point of view, what happens in the body?
Sure. Well, that's quite a big question, actually. So there's a lot that goes on, and I'll sort of speak broadly, but I want to say, sort of preemptively, that everything I share is going to be more of a general statement. Like, this is generally what the research shows that yoga does for the mind and the body. But of course, everyone is different. And so if what I say doesn't resonate with a listener, it doesn't mean that what I'm saying is incorrect or that the way your body's reacting is incorrect. There's a lot of bio-individual differences that of course go on with any practice. So again, just please know that I'm speaking in generalities and that everything I say is going to be backed up by a little bit or maybe even a lot of evidence. If you go into PubMed and you search yoga or meditation, you're going to get just thousands and thousands and thousands of results. And it's all really relatively new. You know, the practice of yoga is just thousands of years old. And only more recently have we been studying on a scientific level to say, hey, how is this really helping us? You know, people that have been practicing for a while, like myself, know how it feels, know how we've changed, and not just in the body. Like, yes, it makes us strong if we're doing the more strength building asana practices. And by the way, if I say the word asana, that just means like the sort of the shapes that we see, like all the shapes that the photos and the videos you see online and on social media, like those are the asanas. Asanas are the shapes that you make in yoga. So even if you're doing a strength building practice and you can say, okay, I can see how yoga's changed me on a physical level. I'm stronger. My hips are more open. You know, like I can feel the effect on my body. There's a lot also that's going on internally, not just in the body, but in the mind. And so I would say that the first thing that I want to mention, this harkens to your commentary about how we met, which is, you know, yoga really does work on the nervous system. And of course, there's many branches of the nervous system, and largely it works on the peripheral nervous system and very specifically the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is the branch of the nervous system that primarily deals with automatic bodily processes. So these are things that are happening behind the scenes that we don't actually have to consciously think about to make them happen. So this is things like controlling your body temperature, breathing, heart rate, digestion. Like, you don't have to think about your heart beating to make it beat. It just beats, right? You don't have to think about breathing. You just breathe. Now, you could think about breathing. And of course, that is one of the yoga practices, is conscious breath. And it's one of the most critical practices, actually. But you don't have to think about them for them to occur. versus me lifting my arm. I actually have to think about lift my right arm. Okay, I'm going to lift my right arm. That's an intentional movement that requires a little bit of brain power, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the first things that I love to mention to people is, and this is the reason why it's so effective in shifting the internal body states on a physiological and even a mental emotional level, is that it affects the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, specifically the autonomic nervous system, through the pathway of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is what balances out the sympathetic and the parasympathetic response in the body. The sympathetic response in the body is what's known as fight or flight. So if you're experiencing a threat or a stressor in your life that feels like a threat, the sympathetic nervous system turns on and helps you get into action to escape the threat or to fight the threat. And conversely, after the threat or the stressor has passed, then the parasympathetic nervous system, again, these are automatic processes, turns on to calm you back down. Parasympathetic is known as rest and digest. So the body activates when a threat or stressor is present, and then it deactivates when that stressor or threat has abated, okay? And so yoga helps to regulate that, right, through the vagus nerve. Now that's the physical body, but in the mental body, it also helps regulate things like neurotransmitter activity. So it helps decrease anxiety, decrease depression. It helps us concentrate better. It creates more fluid connections between different areas of the brain. It increases neuroplasticity, which is like new cell development. So there's really quite a lot of things that yoga and the yoga practices, not just the asana shapes, but meditation and breath work as well on the physical body. And so it's really, really quite amazing that way. And the ancient yogis always knew this. I mean, they didn't have that scientific language, but if you match up what we know scientifically now with sort of like ancient yoga philosophy, they really do mirror one another, but the science is still ongoing, and for what and how long and what ailments and all of that's still being worked out. I mean, there's plenty of evidence out there, but it's still ongoing. It does a lot. It does a lot. Yeah.
Yes. So we're living in a time where everyone is connected to their phones and the television and the news, social media. We're heading into a time of an uncertainty. So we're not living in it. Well, some of us on the planet might be, but the majority of us aren't living in a time where we're being chased by dinosaurs or bears, So it's not like the fight or flight that most people would think of, but we're living in a different kind of stress. So can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the nervous system in today's world? Because there's so many people that are struggling with chronic stress. And then, of course, explain what chronic stress is.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. This is a great segue and a great point to make some distinctions here. So not all stressors are bad. Stress at a baseline is a motivation. So think about a paper that's due. If you're in school, a deadline for a paper or a work project that has you have to turn it in by Friday, right? Like there are some stressors that are good and motivating, or even think of something relationally, like going on a first date. Like going on a first date is a little stressful. Like you're anxious, you're nervous, and what are you going to wear? And you got to make sure that your hair and your makeup's right, or you want to make sure you put on a good first impression. And so there's a little bit of stress, and you might be sweating, and your heart rate's elevated, right? But ultimately, it's a good stress. It's a motivating stress so that you can be on your best behavior and present yourself in the best way or meet that deadline. And so stressors aren't inherently bad. They are actually and can be motivating. And there is sort of a stress scale, like a normal curve. Like there's a little bit of stress that helps us take action and move through the world and reach our goals. And then there's sort of a tipping point where stress becomes negative. And so this can come in a few ways. That can either be from the intensity of the stressor, the fact that it may or may not actually be a threat, like a literal physical or emotional threat to us and to our safety, or it could just be the compounding nature of stress. Like one stress that's kind of high intensity, maybe we can handle that. But 5 stressors all at one time can really debilitate us. So I just want to make the distinction that not all stress is bad. Too much stress, too high intensity stress, and all at one time can definitely affect us negatively, both in the mind and the body. And then compounding stress over time can really lead to what we call chronic stress. And so that's an overwhelming sense of stressors that never really abate, for whether it be for weeks, for months, and even for years. Really, so anything that's ongoing or long-term could be considered chronic stress. It's sort of a loose definition.
So I'm thinking of like police officers and, People who are soldiers, people who are in the army, caregivers, people who are taking care of sick loved ones. Is that what you mean by the ongoing chronic stress, or someone who just has a job that's just ongoing stressful with no release?
Sure. This is where there's some sort of general information and then bio-individual differences. So one is, yes, if you have a job or if you're in a family or home situation where there's just like a lot of ongoing intensity and need, of course, that's going to be a stressor and can easily lead to what we would sort of naturally call like a burnout, right? So people that are first responders of any kind, firefighters, police officers, paramedics, people that work in the emergency room, really any healthcare worker, given what the nature of healthcare is today, people that are in the military, absolutely the intensity of that. People that have major stressors in home, whether it be because of health reasons or safety issues, or, anyone that's dealing with folks with comorbid, like physical challenges, like chronic diseases and or mental health challenges, whether they're happening separately or co-occurring. If they have their own physical or mental health needs, and then they're also caring for someone. I mean, there's lots of ways that people can feel compounding stress. And yes, also, our jobs are highly demanding and for a lot of people underpaid. And then we're in front of our screens all the time. So our attentional resources are constantly being torn between the multiple amounts of devices in front of us, the needs of the actual physical world that are creating demands on us, financial stress and pressure. And then you think about environmental factors, right? So like extreme heat, extreme cold, lack of certainty about what the natural environmental cycles are going to be. I mean, you can talk to anyone and they'll
gas
say
prices increasing.
all that too, right? Or like you can talk to folks and be like, hey, what's the weather going on in your area? And they're like, well, it was 90 degrees yesterday, but today it's 30 degrees. Like those extreme temperature changes certainly have an effect on the body. And so air pollution, light pollution, all these pollutions, even if we don't realize it, all of these stressors are affecting us, and we can't control a lot of them, right? So all that to say, there are lots of reasons why a person could get burned out or could experience chronic stress, but not everyone under the exact same circumstances would all experience chronic stress, because we all have a different baseline, right? We all have a different, even though the nervous system works the same in human bodies, everyone's calibrated a little bit differently. So what used to stress me out before I started yoga doesn't stress me out at all anymore, because my anxiety baseline that used to be up here is now down here. Wow. So now I can handle a lot more challenge and stressors in my environment. But that's because I've got practices that, number one, have brought my baseline down and that I can use to regulate. But not everyone has that, and everyone has different ways to balance, and everyone's baseline's different, right? So I just don't want to say that 5 stressors equals burnout, because that's not the case, because everyone's truly different.
So you just answered one of my questions. I feel like I'm very sensitive to stress. So what you're saying is that everybody has different tolerances of stress. I've heard of the term highly sensitive person who gets very overstimulated with lots of lights and lots of noise, and maybe that might be one of the reasons why I became a meditation teacher. With all that being said, so everybody has a different toleration, they're able to tolerate differently.
Absolutely. So I would say, and this is a speculative statement, I don't know the research on this, so please know that this is my opinion, not scientific fact or anything, but I've just an observation, people are drawn to certain professions because they know they can handle certain stressors. I would never personally want to be in the military or in the police force, because that's not, the intensity of that is not something that I'm drawn to, because I know that I can't handle it. Like that is not something that is, it would not be advantageous for my own well-being, right? Like that level of intensity, or even being a paramedic, like being in that state of heightened, like if I was to ever be a medical doctor, those would probably not be, like emergency room would probably not be the thing I would, it's too intense. But I know that.
911 operators.
Not for me.
No, me either. I'd be crying.
I'd be crying. Down. I don't want to be in the middle of the traumatic event. That's not for me. But some people are drawn to that because they know how well they're able to keep the equilibrium when there's chaos going on around them, right? So that means their baseline's different. Their nervous system's just functioning slightly differently than maybe mine is, or maybe yours is, right? And that doesn't mean that theirs is miscalibrated. It just means that's them, right?
Yeah. Thank God for them, really.
Thank goodness they can handle that, because it's not me.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you right there. So there's all sorts of modalities, not just yoga and pranayama, which are the breathing techniques. I mean, even walking in nature or grounding on earth. Going to the beach and putting our feet in the beautiful water. What happens to our bodies when we don't have that release? When we don't reconnect with our body?
Yeah, so I can talk about it a couple different ways. Think about pressure building. Think about the pressure building on like a balloon, for example. You're blowing it up and you're blowing it up and you're blowing it up, and then you don't let any of the air out, and eventually that balloon could burst or does burst, or like you can see like the skin of that balloon stretching. So think about you compounding stressors, and sitting in traffic and drinking a lot of coffee and challenging phone calls with your boss and all these deadlines, and you're not meeting your deadlines because you're so overwhelmed, and something in you bursts, right? And so maybe it's your anger, maybe you lash out at somebody who asked you a simple question, but you were sort of at your edge that day, or maybe you get a little road ragey. Or maybe to deal with it, you do something that's slightly unhealthy, but sort of self-soothing, like you eat some comfort food, or you have a few too many beers, or you're scrolling on your phone because it's a way for you to sort of like, dip out of the present world and just sort of numb out a little bit. We engage in a lot of numbing strategies in order to like sort of a false release of pressure. Ultimately, that's not necessarily healthy or advantageous for us in the long term. Maybe in the short term, it relieves some version of pressure, but it also ultimately isn't bringing us back to baseline because of the way that our nervous system is now becoming dysregulated. And when I say dysregulated, I don't want you to think that is particularly a chronic. I mean, it can be chronic, but it doesn't have to be. We can be momentarily dysregulated and then need to recognize that and come back to balance. But if we have compounding stressors that we're not sort of releasing the pressure on, so to speak, then we're ultimately like we have a buildup of cortisol, right? Cortisol is one of the biggest stress hormones, and if it's chronically getting expressed in the body without any release, then we've got a buildup of cortisol, and it's going to make us feel this sense of like heightened, right? Whether it's anger or anxiety or burned out or just on edge. And we're going to feel it. It's going to come out in our relationships, and it's going to come out in the quality of our work, and it's going to come out in how we feel about ourselves and how our mind's going to start becoming quite anxious, or to the point of being overactive. This is like, I'm wired, but I'm tired. I'm so exhausted, but I can't sleep.
Yes.
You wake up in the morning and you're like, I'm so exhausted, but I can't wake up. So you have 3 cups of coffee, and then you can't calm down at the end of the day, right? Like, I'm never really fully awake and I really can't calm down again. So much cortisol is just coursing through you all the time.
I know that everybody's different, but for the most part, like how long can the body bounce back from that? If we, like, let's say someone who doesn't do yoga, they have a very stressful life, and starting today, they're going to start taking steps to come back to that normal base that you're talking about. Are we looking at like a year? Are we looking at, there's simple solutions that we can do every day that don't take a lot? What does that look like?
Sure. Well, that's such a good question and really practical question, because I think people want to know that answer. Like, okay, I recognize myself in something you just said, right? Whether it's the being on edge or the road ragey or the anxious mind that can't calm down. So how quickly can I fix this? I don't have a definitive, like, it's going to take 3 days or it's going to take,
right.
I don't have a definitive answer like that. The research could be out there on that, but because I'm not like a physiologist and I'm not currently actively doing that research, I don't have a definitive answer, because I also don't know what your stressors are, how long those stressors have been going on, and what your personal baseline is and what your current behaviors are to try and balance that. So it's really going to be different for every person. All I'll say is, number one, start today by recognizing your own patterns, right? Like, notice that you're on edge. Notice that you're constantly saying yes and never saying no, and that is causing you its own stress, right? Notice the things that are stressful to you and where you could exercise more boundaries. Then intentionally build practices into your daily life. And when I say daily, I really mean daily. For a lot of folks, there just isn't enough time in the day to do everything that they want to do. But bringing yourself back into balance actually doesn't really take more than 5 minutes a day. You can start with 5 minutes a day. And if you're scrolling on your phone for at least 5 minutes a day, and I almost guarantee if you have a smartphone, everyone's doing it for at least 5 minutes, maybe up to 2 hours, right? Yep. And in a day in total.
Or watching TV.
Or watching TV, right?
Yeah.
Out of those 30 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is when you're on a device that's not work, so not work related, but just like for pleasure or like for numbing out or for zoning out, can you take 5 of those minutes to shut your devices down, set a timer, and just breathe? And yes, you're going to go, well, I can't calm my mind down. Well, you're never going to do it unless you try. It literally just takes practice. Nobody's good at it at first. But actually, all you need to do is start with 5 minutes a day and just do it every day. First thing in the morning, after you get your cup of coffee, set your timer, 5 minutes, and breathe. At your lunch break, go to your car, shut the door, turn on the air conditioner, whatever it is that you need to do to get comfortable. 5 minutes, set the timer, close your eyes, and breathe. Last thing at night, like if there's a will, there's a way, and if you're scrolling on your phone for 2 hours, you can find 5 minutes to breathe. I know you can. And if you can do that, I promise you, and I really mean this when I say it, I promise you, you can start to find balance. Maybe it might not be the most balanced state, but it'll be more balanced than what you feel now if you can commit to 5 minutes a day. Am I looking for perfection? If you do it 4 out of 7 days, is that good? Absolutely. But start by aiming for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, building up slowly until it becomes a habit. The habits of your life will literally change your life. So do you need to get on the yoga mat for 60 minutes every single day and do a vigorous vinyasa? Absolutely not. Is getting on your mat going to help you? For sure. Is decreasing your coffee intake going to help? Probably. But all you need to do is 5 minutes of breathing a day, and guess what? It's completely free. Because that's the other thing. It's like, well, I don't have money for all these treatments and all these classes and these memberships. No problem. 5 minutes of conscious breathing a day is all you need, and it's completely free and completely in your control.
Yeah, and that's wonderful advice, because I notice, of course, when I'm stressed, I hold my breath, and a lot of us do. We hold our breath and we forget to breathe. Yes, and the shoulders go up. And what's the number one thing that we say is to our yoga students is lower your shoulders away from your ears, relax and breathe. Yeah.
Relax, shoulders back, broaden the heart, relax the muscles of your face, take a big breath in, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I love it. You are such a busy person. And again, I'm so grateful that you're here with us today. But I would love to take a peek at what your practice is. What's your daily practice? Because I know you've told me that you live a very full life, which is fabulous. And I when I was listening to it, I was like, and doing my research on you, I was like, how on earth does she find the time? And so I'm like, where does she squeeze in her yoga and her breathing? And so you gave us the 5 minutes in the morning and lunchtime and then at night, but can you give us a little glance in Dr. Cavrak's day? How do you keep up with your practices?
So it's just taken years of me knowing myself and my patterns. When I was younger, I was more of a night owl and I wanted to sleep in the morning, but I've gotten older, and so now I'm much more of an early riser. And I've recognized that if I can do even something that's a little more self-reflective in the morning, it really sets the tone for my day. So first thing when my alarm goes off, I resist the urge to flip my phone out of airplane mode. I keep it in airplane mode. Now I don't always, especially if I'm like waiting for a message from somebody or something, but I really do make it a conscious habit to not put my phone into sort of regular operating mode until after I've gone to the bathroom, let the dog out, put my coffee on, until I'm at least a little bit awake, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Even after my morning, like sort of breath work and meditation, that doesn't always happen. But if I can avoid turning my phone and like my screens and like the technology back on, for me, that's really beneficial. So that's the first thing, is like, try to be and connect with myself first and my breath first. And
wow, that's great.
A glass of water first and hydrate before I even look at a screen beyond like turning my alarm off, right?
Yeah.
Then, assuming I've accomplished that, and even if I haven't accomplished that, I have my first morning cup of half calf, and I sit in my chair, and I do a 5-minute meditation. For me, I think a lot of people get caught up on I can't calm my brain down, I can't meditate. And the essence of meditation is actually breath work. So like, if you can't meditate, just start with breath work. And honestly, that for me is more beneficial because it's a lot more tangible and literally visceral. So I like to do a balancing breath in the morning, and that might look like alternate nostril breathing, or it might just look like a 5-7-8 breath, or a box breathing of like Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold out for 4. Something that keeps my mind busy even though I'm focusing on the breath. And I'll literally set a timer for 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 10 minutes, and then I do my breath work. And then at the end of my breath work, and then I do a gratitude practice. I always do a gratitude practice, and I say them out loud, and I try to do them as fast as I can so that I don't actually try and think too hard. It's not like I'm trying to think of the thing I'm most grateful for. I just try to think of anything. And so sometimes it starts with the really literal, like, I'm grateful for this cup of coffee. I'm grateful for the sunshine. I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful for a good night's sleep. I'm grateful for a warm home, a warm, safe home. I'm grateful for clean water. I'm grateful for food in my fridge. I'm grateful for this person in my life who brought me a new opportunity. I'm grateful for the students that come to my classes. And then once I kind of start going, I mean, it just starts coming out, and I'm not really thinking about it. It just flows out of me. And I try to do that for as long as I can until I've got nothing left. And
that is beautiful.
And then I write my to-do list for the day. And then I'm like, okay, now it's like, okay, what do we have to get done today? And honestly, those two things, the 5 minutes of breath work and the gratitude practice, really takes 10 minutes. That's it.
Wow, that's great. What a great way to set yourself up for the day. 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
I think everyone can do that.
10 minutes. And now I know, like, first thing in the morning, I don't have kids. And so that's one reason why I have a lot of time. It's because, like, I don't have children. And so you'd be surprised at how much extra time you have to do these things when you don't have, you know, a baby that you're changing first thing in the morning, or kids you're trying to get off to school. Because I know that for some people, they tell me, like, it would be lovely if I could do this first thing in the morning. But the moment my eyes open, I have 20 things calling for my attention. I completely respect that. So, like, maybe first thing in the morning isn't for you. But maybe it's once the kids go to school, or maybe for you it is that lunchtime moment, or maybe it's once everybody goes to bed at night and everything's cleaned up, or maybe not. Maybe you just stop for the day and you go, I've done enough, and I need 5 to 10 minutes for me. And maybe you do your breath work and gratitudes at the end of the day. You know, there's no right or wrong way to do this, by the way. It's just about doing it.
I love that. I actually do that at night, and I'm going to start doing it in the morning now that I've learn this from you, but I do it at night. When I put my head on the pillow, what I do is I just say, I'm so grateful for this bed and this pillow and these blankets and the roof over my head. And then I go off to sleep. So, you know, it's a nice way to end the day.
It sure is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like, the mind is susceptible when it's in a relaxed state. Okay. And I don't mean susceptible in like sort of the classic hypnosis when you're on a stage. Right. I don't mean anything like that. But just that, if you want to reprogram your mind, you can't do it when you're stressed, because it's too busy being stressed. There's too much cortisol. There's too much norepinephrine, and like the adrenals are going, and the brain, the body need to be in a relaxed state to reprogram those neural pathways to something that's more healthy, to increase that connectivity in the brain, so that you can decrease sort of the old stories you've told yourself about how life goes for you, and that this is how things just are. You're just an anxious person. Nothing ever works out. Finances are always like, you need to reprogram that in some way. And so you can only do that from a relaxed state. So saying your gratitudes as you're relaxing at the end of the night, remembering all the things you do have, is a great way to, number one, like segue into a restful state, but is also a great segue into like reprogramming the brain, not for scarcity, but for abundance and gratitude.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well said. So you teach that yoga is more than movement. It's a tool for regulating the nervous system. For someone who might be a little bit skeptical, how would you explain what's happening in the body and the mind when we practice yoga?
Yes, yoga is a tool for regulating the nervous system, but yoga itself, the word yoga itself just means union, okay? The word yoga, it comes from the root yuj, Y-U-J, yuj, and it just means union. Union can be union between breath and movement. Union can be between like mind, like mental, physical, emotional, energetic, spirit. It can be union between like me and my community. It just means union. Okay. And the tools of yoga, all the tools of yoga, the asana, like the postures, the breath work, the meditation, the yamas and the niyamas, which are like literally the ways to like move through the world. Ultimately, all of those are how you understand yourself and how you move through your world with an understanding of yourself through introspection, which is understanding thoughts, which in psychology we would call metacognition, thinking about thoughts, and the way you understand your body, introspection and interoception, right? And so yoga gives us the tools to understand our mind, our body, ourselves, and all the layers of ourselves through the koshas, which are the energetic layers of the body, so that we can move through the world in a way that's authentic and integrated. So that's ultimately what yoga is. But yeah, on a scientific level, the way that it helps us change is through the nervous system.
Good stuff. Wow. And so you're a Reiki master, and I'm curious, what led you to Reiki?
Sure. Well, anything that I am now is nothing I ever thought I would be way back when I started studying anything. As I already mentioned, I started both at end of high school and beginning of undergrad as a psychology major, and I went all the way through to my PhD. I eventually became a yogi, so a yogi practitioner in my third year of undergrad, and have continued from then until now. When I was in my last year of grad school, so I was in my final year working on my dissertation, that's when I became a yoga teacher. I took my yoga teacher training in my final year of grad school, which, by the way, I don't recommend anybody do that, because that's 2 programs at one time and it's a heck of a lot of work. But I'm grateful for it, because it really opened up a new world for me in terms of a professional path. Like I said, I always intended on being a researcher, a professor, someone that literally was the one that stood up in front of you in the auditorium and like taught you about the mind and human behavior. And ultimately that's not what happened. And so psychology led me to yoga. Yoga itself led me not just to recalibrate myself, but to realize I actually have a calling here, a purpose, a dharma in teaching yoga. And then through that pathway, about a year post grad school, after I'd become a teacher and was teaching in the community in Atlanta where I was living at the time, I decided to leave that community and teach abroad. And so I went down into Central America to teach for a little bit in the jungle. And it was just a beautiful, wonderful experience, and certainly not without its challenges. But once I got to one of the communities where I was teaching, that's when I was exposed to Reiki before that, but I hadn't done a training or even really thought about doing a training until I got to this community. And about a week or week and a half after I arrived to teach in this community, they were offering a Reiki training at the studio. And I just went, oh my gosh, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. Like I came right at the right time. And so that's when I took my level 1 and level 2 training. And that's when I started practicing. And that was, oh gosh, that was maybe 12 years ago at this point. So, psychology led me to yoga. Yoga led me to Reiki. I started practicing all of them, right? I was a researcher, I was teaching yoga, and then, sort of more sporadically, I was offering Reiki sessions. And then I did that for a number of years. And then at a certain point, maybe about 6 years ago, I sort of zoomed out of the work I was doing and went, I'm sort of doing all these things separately. But if I look at them holistically, I can bring all of these services together into like sort of a single umbrella, a single business, a single program, and really offer them in terms of like life and wellness coaching. And so that's when I sort of created my business, which is a holistic life and wellness. It's not everything I do is coaching, but like really could be under like this life and wellness umbrella. And so ultimately I've landed here where I'm still doing research, I'm still teaching yoga, I'm still doing trainings and workshops, and I'm offering energy work. And really it's to serve the whole person. But none of it is where I thought I would be at the very beginning. And it's all happened simply because I followed the callings inside me. The calling to study psychology, this calling to continue down the yoga path and eventually become a teacher, even though when I took my training, I never thought I was going to be a teacher. I just wanted to learn more about the lineage. And then I started teaching and I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing. I never felt more alive in myself and joyful. And I never felt that teaching psychology. I loved doing that, but I never felt the way that I felt teaching psychology the way that I did teaching yoga. And then being able to offer people healing on a very subtle level, which is the energy body, which is really hard to talk about. People are like, it sounds fake. I agree. I think it sounds fake too. Until you experience it and then you go, oh, what just happened to me? What did I just feel? Because like nothing's ever made me feel that way before. So something's different here.
Yeah, and with Reiki, I mean, they offer it in hospitals. There are volunteer programs in the hospitals.
I wish there was more of that. I wish there was more of that.
It's hard to put into words because a lot of people do feel that it's very woo-woo and fake.
I often tell people something like, just in terms of like energy being real. Like, have you ever walked into a friend's house and you can tell and it's a couple and you can tell they've been fighting? even though they're not like acting like they've been fighting, but you can walk in and be like, oh, shit's tense in here, man.
Yeah.
You're all meeting out at a restaurant and they show up and you're like, all right, something's off, right? Like that's you sensing the energy of that moment. Or like it's your partner or your child and they come home and you're like, hey, are you okay? And they're like, I'm fine. And you're like, something doesn't seem fine. And as long as you're tuned into them, you know something's different, right? And so that is one way to get folks that are skeptical about just the idea of energy and the energy work to be like, no, you felt it. You just might not think about it that way, but that is what you're sensing. Is like the energetic resonance. As far as Reiki goes, I mean, there is research on Reiki. It's still growing. It is not necessarily to a point that I think feels very satisfactory, but there are studies out there and you can go into PubMed and look at them and see how they've been, assessed and tested. I'll say in my own work, this is one thing that I do actively, and I don't even call it a research project because it's not really a research project, but it is data. So I've been practicing Reiki for now 12 years. And every single time I work with a client one-on-one, not only do I ask them, of course, what questions do they have for me, and I explain the process of Reiki and what they want to work on today, if anything specific, but I do some pre-assessing and post-assessing on a couple of metrics. And I ask them to self-rate on stress level, anxiety level, sadness and depression, tiredness and fatigue, a level of feeling energized, and a couple of others. And I do this before the session and I do it right after the session. And I'm telling you, 99.5% of the time, maybe even 100% of the time, like quite literally all the time, there are significant drops in stress level, anxiety level, increased energy, increased relaxation, like from 7 to 1 or 1 to 7, like major jumps. Now, yes, this is just self-report. Did I actually shift anything? I'm not taking physiological metrics. I'm not like taking spit samples and looking like, look at cortisol through saliva. I'm not doing any of that. But if people are walking away feeling better, when people are walking in going, I've had a busy day, I'm at the end of myself, and I just can't quiet my mind. I'm just over it. And then they walk out of session and they go, I feel like I can breathe again. Like, I feel like my mind is clear. I feel like I got clarity on something. I feel like my heart doesn't feel so heavy. Like, that's a noticeable shift. And this is like what I just said. I mean, everyone has something different that they say, but every person says a version of that. Yeah. They feel more connected to themselves. They feel completely different at the end than at the beginning. And there's good research to show that even when it's compared to placebo, that the people in the Reiki condition of that experiment fare significantly better than the placebo or the control.
And I think a lot of it too, when it comes to Reiki and with yoga, really, the body knows what to do. If we just can get it, you said it earlier, that when we're at a relaxed state, what was it that you said? You said when we're at a relaxed state, we're able to change the way we're thinking of things, right? We process, our thought process can change. We'll have to go back and listen, but when we're at a relaxed state, which is what Reiki does, actually...
When I was talking about creating new connections in the brain and reprogramming pathways, yes, we need to be in a relaxed state to do that, correct.
And so when we do Reiki, it relaxes the body. We're holding calm, energetic space for someone. I think the person that's on the table, their body knows what to do. That's that higher intelligence of that body knows how to release, knows how to process. When that client walks into your office, they're so stressed out and their muscles are so tight that they're not able to release anything. But once you can get them in, and I think that's what yoga does as well, when we just breathe and it sounds so cliche, but honestly, if you can just slow down and just breathe, our body has the capability of releasing so much. Don't you agree?
Yes, and I'll rephrase what you just said in a slightly different way.
Sounds better coming from you. Go for it.
No, you said no. I'm going to add another layer to that, which is to say, to the extent of the body knows, of course it does, and this is where we tap back into the nervous system. The body knows because the relaxation piece that occurs both through yoga, breathwork, meditation, and Reiki is still tapping into the autonomic nervous system. As I already mentioned at the very beginning, the autonomic nervous system is automatic processes. We don't have to think about it, and the body knows what to do to both upregulate to keep us safe and to downregulate to bring us back down into a relaxed, balanced operating mode. So when you say the body knows, of course it does. It's the autonomic nervous system that all of these practices are activating. But if we're so overwhelmed, so burned out, and just cortisol is being expressed, it's tough for the body to get out of the sympathetic and into the parasympathetic. So if we can help dial down that sympathetic response and upregulate the parasympathetic through Reiki as an example, then yes, it starts to turn on the automatic part of the body that already knows how to calm down. It's basically a bridge. I'm bridging you from a stressed state to a less stressed state. Like, think about it like turning the dials up and down. The body knows what it needs to do, and I'm just reminding it, like, hey, now is a time when we don't need the cortisol. Like, it's okay to turn that off and then turn on a relaxed state to sort of get that train going, right? Get those pathways going. And that's ultimately what's happening. But it's also what's happening in yoga. It's also what's happening when you're getting in child's pose or with legs up the wall or when you're doing with slow, deep breathing. It's rebalancing the nervous system through the regulation of vagal tone through the vagus nerve, right? And like, that's the body remembering, right? It's like turning on those automatic systems that know how to relax. Because we don't, even though we're in a society of go, go, go and multiple screens and our attention's in 20 places at one time, the body still knows, but it has to be reminded because of how much is being demanded of us.
When I was younger, we didn't have the advanced video games and all that we have now. We would go outside and play. We would climb trees, run barefoot in the puddles and go swimming outside. And I'm sure kids do that now, but not as often. A lot of my friends that have kids, they've all shared with me the increase of anxiety that their children are experiencing. I think it's a serious problem in society right now, the amount of anxiety and depression that the younger generations are experiencing.
Yes, and I would say there's a really wonderful book that I would recommend to you or to anyone else who has littles or adolescents who are dealing with this. There is a wonderful psychological researcher. His name is Jonathan Haidt, and his last name is Haidt, Jonathan Haidt. And he's very well respected in the psychology community. I've referenced some of his early work in some of my work. And he wrote a book that was published last year. It's called The Anxious Generation. And it's a New York Times bestseller. He's done all the interviews, all like CNN and like all that kind of stuff. It's a really well-known book. And it's all the research around the essentially epidemic of anxiety in adolescence. And it's mostly around screen time and specifically smartphones. And so there's a lot of science-backed recommendations of like when to introduce your kids to smartphones or not, when to turn them off, how much time they should be on them, social media as well. Highly recommend this book. This is like I said, a really well-respected researcher and really does speak to the developing brain and how technology is affecting the developing brain and how to protect your kids from that. For folks that have kids that are already in high school and beyond, like they're probably past the phases that are discussed, but we can all decrease our screen time consciously, whether we're like an adolescent or an adult. Like the body is so resilient and the mind is so resilient, and we know this because of neuroplasticity. The body's ability to create new neural connections at any time. Yoga actually helps the brain do this. But even if you're not practicing yoga, you can simply decrease your screen time and help to reform those bonds in the brain. Balance, not just creating balance, but like literally creating new cell connections and sort of decrease cell death within the neurons of the brain. And anyway, so for anyone listening, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt would be a great resource for folks.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. I ask all of our guests that are on this podcast, as AI and technology continue to evolve, what message do you want to share with the human community?
Apropos on this question, I am currently working on a research proposal with an organization around data centers. That's less on the human side of what you're asking, but it's incredibly relevant. So I'll bring in a little bit of commentary here. At a baseline, I'm not necessarily fundamentally anti-AI. I'm pro resources that help us live easier and better and help us do the things we need to do on a day-to-day basis in a ways that feels more efficient and allows us to conserve our resources for ourselves. And the way that AI runs is through these massive data centers, and data centers are so deeply bad for the environment. The water pollution being one of the biggest issues, the air pollution. They produce an incredible amount of heat, and that requires a ton of water, and that depletes the natural resources in any area that these data centers are being built. It's really, really bad for whatever community they're being proposed in, and they are being proposed everywhere. They are being proposed everywhere. And not only the amount of pollution that it's going to cause to air and water, but the amount of noise, like the low hum vibration that they're going to create is not just annoying, but it's literally going to just disrupt your circadian rhythm, which is like the natural cycle you go through out in the day of like waking and sleeping. And then the amount of light that they emit is also going to affect not just you, again, in your sleep cycle, or like your circadian rhythm, but like any plants or animals that are around it that are going to be affected by that amount of like artificial light. So that's one thing that I would say, just as far as like outside our ability to handle, or like the way that the human body and brain respond to using AI, it's really, really bad for the environment. And like, it's very clear based on the data centers that are there, the immediate effect that they're having on the environment. So that's one thing. The second thing, and this research is new because data centers and AI is still new. I mean, they really have only been out for what, a year, maybe two, and only more recently are people adopting it in a more ubiquitous way, where it's just becoming commonplace, where we used AI, we used ChatGPT, we were using Claude and Gemini. It decreases our creativity. It just naturally decreases our ability to be creative. And in the short term, maybe that's not a big deal, but in the longer term, that's going to have significant consequences, not just for adults, but developing brains, as we just talked about with simply smartphones and adolescents. And there's so much to say about it, but I would say on the human level, right, to the human community, the more that we engage in technology, again, I'm not anti-technology at all. I really am not. But if we're using it to bridge the gap that we feel and the gap that's there between the human connection that we need, and we're reaching to technology to fill that gap, we're going to get more and more away from ourselves. We're going to feel more and more disconnected from ourselves, because the way that we build community, create community, and like, you know, really develop these deep bonds with each other is like by knowing ourselves and knowing what we need. And one of those needs is connection. We're we're relational creatures. And so if we become too dependent on technology, that means we become either less dependent on, or we spend less time nurturing relationships or building new relationships. As far as a community of people that are relational human beings, that can only have negative consequences. It doesn't mean you're not going to have people in your life, but maybe the ones you have are less, and maybe the ones you have are less nurtured and thus less satisfying. And so then you might find yourself dipping more and more into technology to once again bridge that gap that you're not getting, but ultimately it's not going to be satisfying because it's not the human connection you want. It's not the hug that you need. It's not the person that's going to listen to your challenges and just say, I hear you. I'm not going to fix it for you, but I'll be with you in it. And a computer, the AI can talk back to you, but it's not the same as human connection. And the best thing we can do for the environment, the best thing we can do for the divisions that I know that we all feel in this society, no matter what side of the divides you find yourself on, the more we can remember that we're all just humans and that we all deserve respect and love, the more we can relate to one another. And we don't need technology to be able to connect with each other. We just don't. But again, it's not an anti-technology statement at all. I mean, I use a computer all the time. I've used AI before. You know, like it helps us stay connected, like we're doing right now. Like we're able to have this conversation through this screen and have this really wonderful discussion. So I'm not anti-technology, but I am very pro-relationship. And ultimately in my life, it's community that saved me. It's community that has saved me over and over and over and over again. And so I'll just say, like, what do you need more? Do you need humans, or do you need, you know, a quick answer to a question? And sometimes you need the quick answer, but ultimately we need each other more. And we need the land more than anything else, because there's only one planet Earth. So I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much for sharing your heart. Wow, that is beautiful. Let everyone know who is listening, where they can find you, and if they want to connect with you, with your work, where they can find that information.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So I would say first is go to my website, which is my business name, which is Sacred Self Holistic, one word, sacredselfholistic.com. And then if you want to connect with me on social media, I'm really primarily on Instagram. I do have accounts elsewhere, but I don't really check them. But please find me on Instagram. My handle is Yoga Dr. Sarah, and then the word doctor is written out. So Yoga Dr. Sarah. And please feel free to follow me, send me a DM. I would love to chat with you and learn about you. And if you have questions, and I'll be happy to work with you as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate you joining us today on the Human Community.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your heart. And for those of you who are listening, we want to thank you for joining us today. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Until next time, take a deep breath and remember, you belong here.